I want to present my material on hope today. I think I think it's time to take a break from resistance to nourishing change. Okay, and so yeah, this is been a lot about Pete and Pellin. Pellin became, put another way, going back to history, which I always like to do, as you know. Pellin was sort of born in times of, all the alternative movements and what was then called the human potential movement became humanistic psychology, humanistic psychotherapy, alternative times from hippies to Black Panthers, in a way. So that's where there were the sort of times in which Pellin was born. But the roots of Pellin, of which I've always been proud, very proud, were work I did in a prison, and work David did with street kids. So in a sense, yeah, my pride there is that Pellin's always had a very tough edge. And I guess the tough edge is resistance, nourishing change, attraction to hurt. We don't run away from the fact of human evil. As Pellin became popular in the times that were alternative, and to use that phrase, very hopeful, almost not on a political level, but hopeful in a particular slice of the population. Genuine, I had a fair bit of privilege behind them, one way or the other. The women's movement in America, which is where I and Pellin got some of our first recognition, because women who were involved in that felt that Pellin sort of was a fit, partly because of our material around sustaining purpose in particular. And as the listening material developed, people who were at the forefront of that movement, the women's movement in America, felt Pellin had a fit there. Maybe one thing, and I must admit I'm prone to it as much as most people of my sex, men interrupt women and don't listen. From the best levels to the worst, men tend to interrupt women. And I come across along with passive listening. That's just sort of bits and pieces there. But I guess, saying, partly it was a joke, but partly it's true. Let's let go of that heavy stuff, time to fish and time to cut bait, and let's fish, let's have some fun. But within that, as Pellin sort of developed over those years, I never had any trouble, and it was never even put on us. Seen as, oh, that's that touchy-feely stuff, that's not really significant. An important moment for me was when I was studying with Pearls. There was a woman there, and of course he was famous, and some of you have heard me tell the story before. A woman was there from Israel, very handsome, together lady. And at the end of it, the end of the program, just like a week, she said, well, I got so much out of it, I think it's marvelous. But my husband's a general in this Israeli army, and this has no relevance could have no relevance to the Israeli army. And I was certainly too shy to say anything, but it was absolutely inside me, and I can remember it very distinctly. My work is going to have relevance to the Israeli army. It's not going to be dismissed like that. And Pellin has never been, in that sense, dismissed. So we've always had an ability to look at the harder stuff, which means I think we can sort of engage, engage with political issues. And so when we look at just true rest, the material we're looking at, midweek, there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of positive stuff in true rest. There can be, if there's no joy in it, it can't really be qualified for true rest. There might be, someone might be able to come up with some other examples, but I don't think so. So there has to be that balance, and we've always had it, but I've never had it as clearly. I guess I'm proud of the Hope material, and it too has a particular history. I can't remember the date now. I think maybe it was something like 2013. No, it was earlier. Maybe it was 2007. Okay, I think it was 2007. Anyway, some people in Ann Arbor, one man in particular, got in touch with me and said, you won't remember me, but I was at Pellin when it opened, and I'd like to bring you over to America for a Pellin reunion, which he did. His name is Bill Zarinsky. All expenses paid. And I'd never had anything like that. And it was just lovely. People came from all over America. It was fun. And of course, it was like, well, I'm not that quick on arithmetic, but they were at Pellin in 72, 73, maybe 74, and that was 2007, okay? So if I want to express those, 1972, 73, 74, that's when they would have been at Pellin, most of them. And anyway, he runs something called the Crazy Wisdom Bookstore in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's probably the best alternative bookstore in the Midwest. It's a big deal. And he said, we're going to do this. We're going to organize this, and we're going to bring you in. And he said, I sort of want to tell you that in terms of the bookstore, most of the people are sort of into New Age stuff. And I know that's not what you're into, and you can do whatever you like. but I just wanted to tell you that. And I was just so grateful for the generosity that I thought, no, I'm going to come up with something that fits there, okay, that fits there. So I came up with a material on hope, which did fit with there. You know, essentially spiritual point of view. And that was also the place where I found a way to say that, you know, a lot of people who are into therapy sort of parallel that or have as a background to that a spiritual path. And, you know, I'm different. I've got the background that I come from is a sort of political, historical perspective. Anyway, it went really well. But I did feel in a sense, there's nothing particularly new about it to people who know Pellin, except it's just highlighting hope. And, you know, the place of hope elsewhere, which I'd like to present here sometime. But just to put in a bit of background, because it's just this small, close group, I think I've said this. I belong to a group called the South London Philosophy Circle, and they're mainly academic philosophers, okay? That's where they come from. But through a friend of mine, they wanted me involved and me to go, and I did. And while I enjoyed it, I felt slightly out of my depth. I mean, they were quoting, you know, Kierkegaard and Kant and Heidegger, whoever, Descartes. You know, they were doing all the philosophy stuff, and I have a little bit of background in that, but not very much. And then they, in a nice way, pushed me to present something myself, because everyone, it meets every, the first Sunday of every month in a very typical London pub, in a room above the pub, which for some reason they don't charge us anything for. This is the middle of London, England, okay, where there's just this group. There's something very London, very English about it that I just love. And they, one or two of them, you know, pushed me to present a paper, and I sort of didn't have anything, I felt I didn't have anything to offer, and I guess I felt maybe something like competition, you know, I couldn't compete with them and where they were coming from. I'm not an academic. Most of them were academics from where they are. But I did. The first one, I'll say in a minute what the first one was. And they liked it, and anyway, to sort of trying to keep this clear, that is and I love going there. Now it's, you know, virtual and Zoom for a while. But it's a venue that I can present my material in a very different way. You've been to one of them, Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a place where I can present my material in a very different way, and I just love that. And the first one I presented there, which I do want to get back to, and this is really, you know, academic, professional strand and community strand. I mean, it's very much in that very big question. And I think we can say, sort of, in this time in history, that issue of those two strands is sort of, you know, even more important. You know, just one issue that engages my mind is everyone is saying that people are suffering what is called mental health issues because of COVID, and children are facing serious mental health issues because of not going to school and not seeing their friends very much. You know, these are being identified as mental health issues of a volume that no one's going to be able to provide. And we've got something to offer. We've got something to offer where these forums started, with the Pellin lived. That sort of engages me, and that sort of brings the presentation to the philosophy circle. And it's got its own character, but it's very much a philosophy circle. And there's not a philosophy club because there's no hierarchy. Anyway, you know, it's an intellectual big deal. And, you know, that's a place where I can present my material in a different way, to, sort of test it out in my own mind, other people's mind. The first one I did, and this is where I mentioned the two strands, and it's a big question: can David Pellin be called a philosopher? And certainly in his lifetime and everything that followed, everyone would say no, you can't, because you know, what's his knowledge of philosophy? What university did he go to? Where did he get his PhD from? You know, what was his master's thesis on? What's his particular specialty in philosophy? Doesn't make it. And that was a venue where I could present that issue, okay, very strongly, and be heard. So, a bit indulgent of me today, okay. But bringing that back to rejigging my material so I could present it to this group of, because Ann Arbor, Michigan is also a heavyweight academic town, known as the overachievers capital of the world, and very competitive, and you know, Harvard and places like Harvard rate above Ann Arbor, but on the other hand, they've got a city around them. I mean, Ann Arbor is a college town, you know. The university is the industry. As Americans would know, including the university football team. You know, that's university town. So presenting in Crazy Wisdom Bookshop is the sort of alternative hippie end of that culture, academic culture. So that was the background to developing this, and then developing sort of similar ways of getting at our material. I think that's what I'd like to do for me today. Different ways of getting our material so we can think about getting it out to a wider audience, think about an ambition around the Pellin lift, that even a short exposure to this material could give your life a lift in hard times. And then if we bring in the hope material, because hope is, you know, a feeling that there'll be something good in the future, and it was the effort. And it's that which in our past, where we set up memory links where we're going to fight when things are rough. You know, Studs Terkel, who came from near you, Cynthia, Chicago, born, bred, and based, you know, he you know, one of his books was Hope Dies Last. And Hope Dies Last, apart from coming out of many different places, for him it came out of the civil rights movement. And we shall overcome. Mary.
I just wanted to share a story on Thursday connected to what you're talking about. On Thursday, I was in a roundtable discussion where each of the 4 women guests had like a thing, like my book, to share. But we all ended up talking about mental health. We ended up talking about hope, but a lot. But the particular thing I wanted to share was that the woman host was a Black woman who lives in Long Beach. She'd run for the city council and been defeated. And she said, I didn't go to university. I went to the University of Hard Knocks. I was laid off 8 times. I've been homeless. And in 2024, I'm running for state senate. So,
Yeah.
That's where... Can I just finish? I was so excited to be in the company of one of the Black women we've been talking about. But what I was thinking about was the academic, official strand and the community strand. It's a very exciting development that women and men, particularly minorities, who have more roots in the community than in the academic, many of them, and the rough end, like this woman and Cory Bush, are saying, I'm going to go and get authority, but they have to have hope to do that, right? They have to have hope to fuel that almost invasion of the official strand.
Yeah, and I think if you and hopefully this can come through, people connecting, connecting through Zoom, people connecting in new ways, people being able to meet up for a political demonstration because they can connect each other through Twitter and all that sort of thing. Because I think there are memory links that you can trace back in a lot of these people when they say, that's when I decided to do something. I'm not saying that's true for everyone, memory links are as varied as insects, and I think there are more species of insects than we can fathom, something like that. Memory links are infinitely varied, so it won't be the determination to, okay, I'm going to make that difference in the same way for everyone. But I think if you take a effective political group like that, I think there will be a general place that they made a commitment, okay, and made a commitment. And that's where our material on hope comes in, because I say, this is from a Pellin perspective, I'm not saying it's the only way to look at an issue of largest hope. But it's, the way we look at it, sources of hope are in purpose, particularly sustaining purpose, contribution from hurt, and true rest. And that is and because true rest is in there, that is the balance of the hard stuff where hope often begins, okay? The way that we, and particularly in the realm of politics that we're interested in, that's where it begins. I mean, you could take another realm of politics that comes from people who are in groups and families that have had privilege forever, and their concern is to maintain the privilege. Okay, I don't have a feel for them, and all I know is they don't like me and mine. But if we bring it back to people who have a hope and keep going with it, then I think we do get at those three elements: purpose, true rest, and contribution from heart. Purpose gives us the substance of feeling our life has meaning, and feelings of accomplishment, steady stream. Contribution from heart heals our bad memory links, and brings in contribution and brings in feelings of accomplishment. And true rest has all the power to renew us. And I think hope, and that's one way of looking at it, but another way of looking, and that was the way I presented it when I first came up with the topic. But I would, and I guess in a moment I want to talk about hope and memory links, but even before that, I guess I want to spend a little bit of time, because I do want to come at hope from my world of work, which is the helping professions and the and therapeutic work. My background interest to that, and to some extent a foundation for it, that enabled me to see it in a wider perspective, is history and politics. But, you know, I'm not a politician. History and politics are not my work. If I was a politician, the material I'm presenting probably may not be nearly as good, but there'd be 500 people on this forum meeting. Okay, that's a performance life force. That's politics. But I think we can, and from a therapeutic point of view, where we could almost say one definition of the therapeutic world is we don't have to hide, be ashamed of our vulnerability. It almost defines what the caring life force is. And I think from our point of view, we can talk about the fragility of hope. You know, we've got the Cory Bushes and the Barack Obamas and those that succeed. I was very aware of this in you know, my time in a couple of small hill towns in southern Italy, Montecorvo and Negropoli, in the Cilento, and I knew those people really well. You know, they were very accepting of me. They were very accepting of the work I was doing, and the students who came there, of course, had a really good. Partly because I didn't look down on them, and they knew that. I think I've said that here before. But I knew the other side of the American dream, okay? I knew people who'd migrated to America and had not made it and had come back. You know, the American dream is not something that within which there's a guaranteed success. And failure, the American dream. So when we're talking about hope from our world, the therapeutic world, I think we need to see it you know, much as you know, I admire, you know, the curry bushes and the AOCs, etc. But they're the successors. Yeah, Cynthia.
Well, I was thinking about hope, and you talked about, it was months back, we had another talk about hope, and I've been thinking about it since. And one of the things I was thinking about, there's a big connection between hope and the pendulum in terms of whether it's healthy or not. Hope, I mean, there's hope that can lead to pendulum swings. You get yourself on a big high and with hope, and then it brings you to a big low. But there's also a hope coming from the calm, you know, thinking like, okay, you know, and maybe your hopes are not as big, and you know, I think they become much more realistic. Like, okay, yeah, you know, it's a rough time now. I've been through rough times. Other people have been through rough times, and it's a different. I think it's a very different way of doing it when you're having hope from the calm than when you allow it to send you on a high. I don't know, but it's something that's been rolling through my mind.
Oh
I don't
no,
know
I
if
think
that's something.
that's absolutely true. And way before I developed this material, I remember very distinctly. It was when my first marriage broke up, and I was in Italy, and I had with a friend who was helping me. That was literally the first year or two, helped me establish the place. You know, I developed a phrase called moonlight walks. It was very lovely countryside, and not very much developed at all. And I'd go on a moonlight walk and get really high on some plan. It was an enormous pain. I was heartbroken. And, you know, I can do this and I can do that. I remember once I was going to get in the car and drive off somewhere, and Ken just took the keys from me and said, I'm not going to let you go. So moonlight walks became for me a sort of personal shorthand of these really, what you're absolutely talking about. For me at that time, these really destructive hope highs. Mary.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate you bringing that point up, Cynthia. I noticed over my long history when I was having extreme swings, they would, because when when I first started trying to modulate them, I was like a rocket. I would take off like a rocket and I would crash like a rocket crashing. And there'd be like 5, 6, 7, 8 months in between the two rocket takeoff and crashes. But the takeoff was always hope. I'd be in the deep depression, and only I didn't really understand it at the time, but I'd like, you know, outrun the way of that terrible draining after an extreme high. I'd actually, you know, because it was 7 or 8 months, I was actually readier to come out than I knew. And then something that promised change, promised, you know, maybe a fantasy or maybe a visitor, whatever it was, I'd zoom out, and then at the end of being overexcited for months, some disappointment would set in, you know, maybe the plan I tried to execute, and then I just plunge. And I think it is a really important background to talking about hope, because it isn't that kind of hope. You might need it sometimes, right? Someone who's not a regular pendulum swinger might very well need a high of hope to go out of a rut, but that's a different situation. As you so often say, it's about their tools and it's how you apply them. But I think that steadiness, you know, if I get an idea now, I tend to do it from that steady place. It's almost built in that I'm thinking about how to execute it while I'm having the actual idea almost. Anyway, I just wanted to reinforce what Cynthia said, because I think it's such a good point.
No, I think, I'm sure, And I can be a person like this, but I'm not. But I'm sure they're a person a bit more extreme than me, or haven't had the support I've had, who become addicted to hope highs, just the same as some people become addicted to falling in love. They've got to go through that. They've got to have that fix every couple of years, because it's like nothing else. And I guess some of us at times, a hope high is like nothing else. And yeah, it can be extraordinarily dangerous. And I think bringing in the pendulum there, Cynthia, is just spot on. I just finished Barack's first volume, his political memoir, which, by the way, is so good, and in a way so Pellin. But over and over again, and he's the guy who talked about it. Wrote a book about it, made it the center of his political campaign. And, to read, because it's very transparent, at the same time, very calculated, way more performance life force than Kerry Michael, which is his job. But, this is a guy who absolutely knew about the pendulum from good fortune or luck or people in his life or just himself. But the pendulum's almost sort of all over it.
Can I share a bit about
Yeah, Nikki.
what something's a bit like for me about this? Because I'm the opposite of Peter and Mary about pendulum. I grew up flattening everything out, and this thing about hope. It's anyway. It's just so much kind of smaller, but it's the same. So I'm thinking. So hope. I feel. I suddenly had this moment of hope when I was 5.5. A particular moment. I suddenly saw that compassion and empathy exist in the world. And there was like this speck of hope that maybe it could exist in my world. And then the next day, my grandfather was dead, and that was clearly the end of that. I wasn't going to get that in my world. Ugh. And I'm only just remembering as people are talking that in recent years, I couldn't tell you exactly when, but I certainly went through a phase of really experiencing it a lot. That particular hope crash memory link. So something must have released in me, and I would have a period of like hope about some particular thing. It'd just be a small thing, something going to work out or something, but I would feel a new excitement that I'd never felt before, and it would just really quickly, whatever the thing was that I had hope of that was going to work out, would really fast, absolutely not going to work out. And I was so aware that it was that combination, those two memory links coming one fast on the heels of the other, repeating and repeating and repeating. And this, I don't know, might have gone on for 2 or 3 years, that it seemed to me that quite frequently I would go through this little palaver that I never had before, and then I'd be annoyed with myself. It's like, oh, hope crash again, hope bloody crash again. Oh, and so just as we're talking about it, it's making me realize I think that kind of stopped. I don't recall last time I had that really frustrating hope crash thing. And so now I'm just kind of wondering if that's to do with, tied up with my, what I call my struggly time that I'm going through now. And I think what it is, because I've achieved, in recent years, I've achieved ending all these problematic things, which were sort of the main focus. And now, and I was aware when the final one kind of got achieved last year, I was aware oh, and I haven't got a thing I'm trying to get out of my life anymore. What's going to be my objective, really? You know, what's my next, I don't, you know, and sure enough, here I am in that time, and we're in lockdown, and it's the middle of winter, and it's like, oh my God, I haven't got, I've got optimism. I guess for me, optimism, I am optimistic because I kind of know what I'm doing. I know that I'm working on my stuff. But I'm really struggling, and I don't know where I'm going with this bit now, but I'm really glad to realize that I'm not getting hope crash within it. Oh my God. I'm just struggling in, it all just feels a bit dire, but at least there's not an awful crash. Okay, those are my comments. Thank you very much.
No, thanks for that. I think it's useful, and I think this is where we can say from the therapeutic world or the people work world, where we really have something to offer because we've got more because within the caring life force, there is always doubt, okay, and uncertainty. And in terms of, you know, the way I talk about myself, shyness or whatever another word is for that. And I think within that, we at times have something much more subtle to offer. So I think we can, I think we can see that the danger of hope crash. I think that's a terrific formulation, Nikki, because that, and when I was talking about my moonlight walks, and that's a goddamn long time ago. That's my first marriage breaking up. You know, that's like 1973. And that's what I had. I couldn't afford it. And I knew I couldn't afford one glass of wine. Tried one glass of wine, I'd go up to feeling good, get into a hope high, crash. So I think hope crash is something that we've really got to offer. And we're not taking, and the way you present it, you're not taking anything away from hope. You're just saying, for some of us, there can be this particular dimension to it, and we can look at it and we can face it. Cynthia.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something. All of this was actually bringing up of actually a pretty positive memory link from my past and my childhood, and that is the example of my grandmother who, you know, I mean, she wouldn't, she wasn't, you know, she didn't do any kind of therapy. She thought all of it was silly, you know, and, you know, she's also the type who she said, we asked her, she's depressed. She's like, we didn't get depressed, you know, we just pulled ourselves up and, you know, did what we had to do. But one of the things I remember very clearly with her, and I'm thinking about hope coupled with the perseverance strata. I mean, she went through pendulum swings, and even though she said she never got depressed, she got depressed at times. But there was always something about her that no matter what she faced, and in a sense she did pull herself up, no matter what she faced, she always had like hope for something better no matter what was going on. I mean, she actually did achieve a lot in a strange way. I mean, being an immigrant from Sweden with, you know, at that time when that was not, you know, coming from subsistence farmers and, you know, raising her family and you know, with a husband who was kind of unreliable. I mean, but she'd say, great with mice. Like the material life force was amazing. Carrying was a little not there, but but she could, and I'm sorry if I'm going on about this, but I'm just thinking of how much gratitude you know, no matter what the problem was, she would sort of find a way through it. And I mean, she never stopped making, until the final place she lived, like little floor plans for the house she wanted to live in. And it just, you know, and I think she just didn't give up. I mean, no matter what, and she's faced a lot of setbacks. You know, she talks about my grandfather. She's like, you know, I could have divorced him 10 times over, but you know, this time we didn't divorce. We just kept going, and you know, and I don't know. Sorry, I just started. I mean, I guess I'm being a bit indulgent right now too, but I was just thinking about her.
No, that's absolutely relevant, and I also think it's relevant because I'm reading a lot and studying a lot, and I ordered a big map I'm going to put up on my wall about Sicily. Okay, and if you take the sort of hope, the relationship between energy and hope, and the way you spoke about your grandmother is almost a typical America, right? All that energy, all that way forward. You know, the energy of immigrants, the energy of the new world. And there's something about even the phrase new world sort of has hope in it. And this other country that sort of has bitterness, sadness, tragedy, they can't get rid of the mafia. It's hard for Sicilians to have hope. They have something else. You know, using Americanism, actually, they've got true grit. But I think there are places where sort of hope grows more. And I think your grandmother sort of expressed a lot of that. And if we bring it down from, you know, that's a big perspective, countries, New World versus old, and history. But if we bring it back down to the more sort of, you know, one person's life, you know, your grandmother's life, you know, she held on to something like hope. And the story you told about her drawing those floor plans, I just, that really touched me. And that's where I said, you know, when I guess the deflation of hope, if you can put it in that phrase, for those people who come back from America to southern Italy, and the ones who've not made it, and how they sort of, I don't know, sort of, a bit like Nikki said, you know, it's a slower thing, but it's almost a hope crash. Elizabeth, do you want to come in?
I don't have anything to say right now, but I've been listening.
Okay. I think it's a real sort of example of a couple of things, okay? The next bit's hard, okay, sorry. It's just that I'm writing a book on decisions, and it's really hard to make that statement, okay? Yeah, my whatever, uncertainty, shyness, blah, blah, blah. But looking at, and writing this book, I'm thinking, you know, there's no sort of science. And, you know, I'm looking at the Pellin Tools, which I'm calling the DIY part of the book. And then I'm also looking at the mysterious part of the book, which I sort of call Que Sera Sera, from a popular song. Whatever will be, the future's not ours to see. And sort of some of the way I was writing about today, maybe this book is just a way we can reflect on decisions. Yeah, we got the practical bit and, do all the right things. With no guarantee it's going to be a good decision, even when we do all the right things. So what I'm saying, I think we've got an opportunity here to sort of reflect on hope without it having it being so certain or problematic or passionate as it needs to be when it's a form of when it's a form of political motivation, okay? Absolutely a form of political motivation. We've got a different way of looking at it. And, as I say with pride these days, certainly, I was at Barack Obama's first inaugural. I was there, standing in the freezing cold. It was so cold that it was announced on television, take cardboard with you and stand on the cardboard because the ground is too cold. And that's what we did. He gave his speech and I was disappointed. It didn't hit the heights. And then I had the thought, and me boasting, that was deliberate. That deliberately he did not want to take people up onto what here we were called a hope high. And now reading this is my boast, reading his memoirs, that was deliberate. He said, no, we don't need poetry, we need prose in this speech. And I think, he had a sense of what we're saying here is that, the hope high is dangerous because then a whole bunch of people will crash. You were talking about, Nikki, about you crashing, but, what if you take a whole bunch of people up there and crash them down, which is certainly what Hitler did. If you read that part of history, he took people, and it's in the film, Cabaret, it's in Cabaret, the film Cabaret, when the Germans stand up and sing their Nazi song. He took people up into a huge hope. Mary.
I just had a question because you said almost in passing that hope in politics has a certainty about it and it's different in the caring life force. I wondered if you could say a bit more about that because I'm not kind of what you mean, but
it has, when it to some extent it's bringing in strata and being a naggy trainer and just reminding people of the diagram. It's sort of social strata, okay? It's social strata in politics. And the performance life force. And, you need to, if I'm answering your question right, Mary, I'll stop in a minute and say, see if I am or not. You have to present a certainty. And the trick is, using that word with a great deal of modesty, the trick is to be truthful and certain, but you've got to come across with a certainty. This house will not, we will not lose, this house will not be divided. This union will not disintegrate, and recognize that they seceded, because that was Lincoln's stance. He said they never left because they didn't have the right to. And so you have to come across with a certain certainty. I have a dream, or I've been to the mountain, or I've seen the other side.
It's
We shall overcome. You can't come across in that realm. This is where the strata is important, because high social strata will be. Yeah, Nikki, I'm just holding up the diagram. High social strata is understanding diversity, accepting the validity of the other side. There are two sides to every question. And politically, it can be paralyzed. And expressing doubt. And you've got to say, no, we will overcome. And
some of that is...
Maybe we will overcome it. We will overcome. Sorry.
Yeah, because I say I have the phrase rallying to a cause, and the fact that in politics you're talking to an audience, you're not talking to a person, because that obviously the next step is, if you go to the care and life force, you cannot, as a people worker, say with certainty, when you're trying to help someone have hope, you can't say anything with certainty because it would be disastrous. And some of that's probably...
Yeah, the example, I think my apologetic bit is that some of what I present is like my stump speech, and stump speech are always endlessly repetition and the person telling the same story over and over again. That's what a stump speech is. But the best sort of example I know of that is the parable that Kazantzakis, the Greek author, came up with. It's this young man who was a carpenter, and his father was quite old, but his mother was young and devoted to him. And he had these sort of thoughts, really big thoughts, like he's the son of God. And, he went to a therapist, and the therapist helped him overcome his delusions of grandeur. And Jesus was the carpenter and never became Jesus Christ. That's a story for our profession. Okay? And I guess there's no doubt you couldn't. If I'm going to sit here and tell you I'm the son of God, of course it's a mental illness, right? Anyway, I don't want to be disrespectful to religion. All I'm saying is when belief comes in, I guess, belief and hope, I guess that's where I would say, taking Kazantzakis as parallel another way, I could say, yeah, maybe at some point, Jesus' sort of belief was a bit fragile. And he didn't need someone, by the way, from the official strand, coming in and knocking that out of him or therapizing it away. So I think we can look at hope as having a fragility because we're not working with the polls or the voters, huge numbers. That's not our field of work, but we're working with individuals. And I think within that, we can look at the fragility of hope, because I think, on the one hand, there are the AOCs and the Barack Obamas and the Cory Bushes, but what about all the guys and gals, to use a phrase from my age, who didn't succeed, who lost the election, who political careers did not continue. You know, there's lots of them around. And it's good. The people whose careers did not succeed could be as good as the people who did. So within that, we can look at, I think, that hope has all this power to it, but at the same time, it is surprisingly fragile. For some of us, some of the time.
I think it would be good to hear about if in our work you can't, or if in this field you can't address hope with certainty, like how do you nurture hope? Like what can you do with hope? Recognizing the fragility, recognizing the pendulum swings.
Well, I think, and I don't, you know, there are certain weaknesses in Pellin. Some of the weaknesses is I've never quite written the sort of first page or the first two paragraphs. But we do, you know, we have this, okay, because, you know, that basic metaphor of a nourishing family. If you take that in the direction of the American writer, academic, and philosopher Paul Goodman, who's some, you know, my generation more than a later one, he called it collegiate group, you know, a small group of people who are studying and working together, a community, you know, family, community, small collegiate group. I think within that, and I think I've got it at times, I'd like to have it more, but we can have blazing belief and we can have blazing Cynthia.
Well, when I watched the movie with the documentary with David Pellin, and the thing that struck my mind is how can you have hope? The thing that, or what you do with hope, the thing that really sold me on him in the whole movie of all this was when the one kid had gone to school, and he was going to school, and he brought him there, and he made his, says, you know, teach me about an atom. And then he was, you know, praising him for, you know what, this was hard. Not many people would come back, but you came back. And there was something in that. And to me, when you're talking about how did you hope, to me, that was like one of the most hopeful things in the whole, and I can't quite say why, I can't articulate, but that image to me, it seems to be sort of what you can do with hope and therapy. I don't know, that image came to my mind, and I can't articulate it, but
I just want to say that I appreciate that so much, and it tears me up, you know, because in terms of hope, staying on topic, you know, going back all those years and the struggle to get the film made and and then you come, and it was made in 1969, so that's 50 years ago, and you coming up with that, it just that gives me hope. Okay, and I guess there's something about hope at times that goes back to those memory links. You know, when you were saying, Nikki, goes back to, you know, your grandfather, goes back to that moment in that film. And yes, I guess that's where because just before you came in, when I said it, yeah, I guess I can at times blaze with a certain certainty. And I was about to say, and David certainly did that, okay? And then you came in for a good team, and then you came in with that sort of example. And yeah, and I guess to some extent that's, you know, keeping our commitment, feet on the ground in our caring life force, because that's our job. But at the same time, claiming enough performance life force that will do it. Because, and one of the things that flashed to me when you said that, Cynthia, and again I thank you, there's a whole sort of nasty infight about getting the film done, okay? Because I got it, I put in a proposal, and to my huge delight and surprise, I got it accepted. And then I walked into the activator unit one day, and my colleague, his name was John, and I can use his name, was there sitting with David, and there was a bit of a, and maybe I came in quietly because they didn't stop talking. They didn't realize I was there. And John is telling Dave how in the movie he's going to be mocked, and it's not a good idea to have it made. And, you know, a hugely awkward moment. And John sort of stood up awkwardly and left. And I looked at Dave and said, what the, you know, what's going on? And this is a Pellin, a David Pellin statement. Well, he might, oh no, that's the way it ended. It ended with, before John left, David said to him, you might be right, John, you might be right. And John got up and left. And I took, and Dave just looked at me and said, well, he might be right, and burst out laughing. You know, and I got, you know, what he was, yeah, he might be right, but I'm not agreeing with you. I'm just saying you might be right. And as some of you know, I've used that in a whole lot of other situations. Yes, you might be right. Yeah, I guess I'm just, you know, putting that bit of transparency into an example of hope. You're taking me back to those memory links, okay? You're taking me back to that memory link and the fight that was happening. Because this guy who made the film had made a film about a Canadian billionaire and had mocked him very cleverly. National Film Board of Canada was a very, and still is, a very, it might be the most sophisticated documentary group in the world. And they had a particular sort of hard edge ability to be cynical, you know, take a shot. Yeah, you know, clever eggheads. And, you know, John had planted a real seed that it could have not been made. I negotiate, Mary.
Can I say something? All right here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just have I'm having an interest. I'm having a relationship to hope that is finding its most subtle kind of layers. Almost like there's dangerous highs to hope, and that there's hope in abandoning hope for a time and moving over to surrender and acceptance, and it feels more like there's energy and love that can come from that place, but it's more faith. And I had a picture of there were mugs in that room. Was it upstairs above a storefront?
No, it was on the street. You literally walked into the street.
Right in. But
Yeah.
there was a mug. There would be a mug for you
Yeah, yeah. It was very rough
Yeah.
and red.
Yeah. And it had a feeling to me, I just was seeing that in my mind. And even before there was any engagement or interaction or a plan of action, there's home and there was a place and a holding place. And it felt really powerful for me to see the mugs were like, you're here, or David's gonna be there, and I and there would be people sitting in the comfortable couches, and being in each other's presence and seeming to just be safe and just hanging there and listening through osmosis, but just being. And that quality is, well, like home, that is the nourishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the home, the feeling of home, that I'm sure was extremely important and powerful and kept people moving forward because they had a place to come back to. That was.
Yeah. No, that's where, that's what he called it, he said the unit's a feeling. It's not a place, it's a feeling. And that's why I think you're absolutely right, Tamara. It's that feeling. And, in some ways, I've taken his work and wanted to be recognized and, put it in form, a lot of words.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, it comes back to that. And I think if we go back to origins, a point you often say, Nikki, what we've got to do everywhere is go back to the beginning. And if we go back to the beginning, he was just squatting there, okay? Because he didn't have anywhere to live. And some kids dropped in and talked to him. And it sort of, and then someone this was before I was involved. Someone put a big question mark on the door. And that attracted more people. That's all it was, a big question mark on the door. But you're right, it started with a feeling. Absolutely, there's no question about that. And yeah, really.
That's lovely what you evoked there, Tamara. I was just thinking when I asked my own question, I was thinking about clients who've come in despair and found hope that I've worked with. And I realized that one thing is, in the California anyway, people say a lot, holding the hope for the client when they're depressed. And it's hard to articulate, but there's really, that it's a real feeling that you have faith and hope in this person. And I was thinking about, well, what did I see in the particular person whose life really turned around? And I thought, it's related to contribution from hurt. I could see that she had a material life force that had really worked for her in the past because she'd worked in insurance and she'd been good at it. And I could see that she had caring life force, even though her experience currently was that she couldn't bear to be in a group and she couldn't bear to talk to people and so on. And there's something about, the other thing I was flashing on was the way I dealt with the fact that she couldn't get up till the middle of the afternoon because she was so depressed. And my transparency about sharing that experience, reducing shame. And there's something about lots of little moments doing exactly what Cynthia pointed out Dave did. Lots of reducing shame moments coupled with praise for the minutest thing, and the combination of holding the hope, seeing the potential in the client because of the life forces, and which are kind of very clear when you're familiar with them, aren't they? You don't know for certain the mixture or anything, but you can see if someone has performance life force, even when it's coming out twisted, or you know, or you can see they have caring life force because they really mind about what people think about them or something like that. And then that coupled with turning the shame around into something different. So that's what I just wanted to share, those things.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think the feeling of it, and going back to the pendulum, because I think because you can take, I mean, if you take, and I'll try and keep this really brief, because I could go on and on about this sort of stuff. Barack Obama had to let go of it. He didn't use the word much at all for 6-7 years when he was president. Because he didn't have, and he wrote about this himself, he didn't have what FDR had. He couldn't communicate the hope to other people. So to some extent for him, it was a good political campaign. But he didn't have enough caring life force almost to get across. So he had to drop it and came in elsewhere. Essentially, he came in on competence and material life force. Stop, Peter, don't go down that track. Whoops, going up too high. But I think you could see, yeah, he didn't have that. He didn't have what FDR had, what Abraham Lincoln had, what Martin Luther King had. Had it in moments, but not really, not inside himself. And, you know, no one's perfect. He didn't get shot, for which the nation must be hugely grateful. Abraham Lincoln and Dr. King did. So I think hope and seeing the people who can take hope and hold on to it, and going back to the feeling, I think they do it sort of in the calm and then a little bit on the low side. And you know, the pendulum is not what appears, it's not appearance, it's what's going on inside someone. And I think if you look at that bit of film, because I remember that young man, and I think you can almost see, yeah, Dave could get it all across, right? But in another way, he was holding on to his pendulum and keeping it in the middle, keeping it a little low, keeping it not in the expectation, well, you know, I'm going to change this kid's life, but I'm going to do my best. And then I think you get into, I guess what we're sort of talking about today is what hope is in predominantly the caring life force. And I think it's got a lot of subtleties to it. Well, thank you. We'll end there with time and weather, okay? I think yeah, I'm in Norfolk in England and it's 7:30 and dark. Nikki, we'll stay over here before we go over there. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Nikki in Wimbledon, 7:30, also dark.
Tamara?
I'm tomorrow, San Francisco, 11:30 a.m. Sun is out.
Okay. Cynthia?
I'm in Kankakee, Illinois. It is actually exactly 1:30 right now, and it is very typically February, except for the snow hasn't melted yet. It's very gray, but it's not too cold.
Okay. Mary?
I'm at Mary, also at 11:30, and Rosarito Beach, and I can't quite tell if it's sunny behind me, but it looks, because I'm in the garage, but it looks bright enough. I think it's sunny.
Okay. Elizabeth?
I'm Elizabeth in Eugene, Oregon. It's 11:31 and it's still gray.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming. As Rachel Maddow says, watch this space. Okay. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.